All right, everyone, thank you for being here today. This is our ProLink HFA webinar series. We host this webinar on a monthly basis, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today as we talk about comparing sources and uses at application intake and closing using a custom data view. For today's presentation, I'm going to be covering a brief summary of ProLink for those who may be less familiar with our company. We'll then turn it over to Alessandra Billy to cover comparing sources and uses at application intake and closing using a custom data view. So, I am Alexa Sanchez. I am the Sales and Marketing Associate with ProLink. Alessandra Billy is our Business Analyst 2 with ProLink. She supports client implementation by developing smart docs, templates, process maps, and system configuration to drive long-term operational efficiency. I'll now walk through an overview of ProLink. As a reminder, this webinar series is meant to be a tour of functionality that's available in our systems. It's not really a training. It's more to make our users and anyone who's interested in ProLink HFA more aware of what's available in our systems. So, about ProLink. We have supported the affordable housing industry for more than 25 years. Our clients include state and local housing finance agencies, tax credit syndicators, investors, and developers. We are fully dedicated to supporting the affordable housing industry. We work really hard to build systems that are holistic and valuable and connect all the pieces and people together through tax credit origination and the continued provision of affordable housing. We build systems to support all different stages of your deal life cycle, as well as the collaboration and involvement that you need from others. We also have a great team of employees who are dedicated to helping our clients solve the affordable housing problem. Our team consists of technical experts around affordable housing. Many have been with us for 10 and 15 years plus. They speak your language and they know this business. Now, this is a high-level picture of the agencies that we support across the United States with ProLink HFA. We're currently supporting 18 housing finance agencies and 2 supportive service agencies that are located in California and New York. And this is what we call our bird's eye view of enterprise modules for ProLink HFA. ProLink HFA always comes with these 3 areas available to all of our users. Now, early in the year, we were talking about our tax credit allocation module. We've shifted into our development module and the different functionalities that's available there. We may end up focusing on asset management and compliance towards the later end of this year and definitely into next with this webinar series. Now I'm going to hand things off to Alessandra so she can discuss how to use custom data views by comparing sources and uses at application intake and closing. So Alessandra, if you could please take over screen sharing.
Great. Thank you, Alexis. So as Alexis says, my name's Alessandra Belli. I'm a business analyst 2 here at ProLink. And today we're going to be talking about comparing the development costs from application intake all the way through cost certification. So starting out, we want to go through what our business problem is. So what is the problem? We have developers who are submitting what they think that their anticipated costs are when they're applying. These costs are then used to score projects and award them, but as funding is secured and they're going through all of the processes that it takes to actually bring these to life, these costs can change. And as the deals are awarded, the costs firm up until closing, that's when they're expected to remain static at that point. Currently, agencies are unable to see how these costs change as it progresses through the stages very easily. So when cost certification is received, using the actual cost variances Against the closing costs, it can provide insight into the health of the project and allow the agencies to react when the developer applies for a future award and use this as a reference in knowing how it went on this project. So why is this a problem? One, if the costs do change, the project might not be in that awarded scoring threshold, and we may need to adjust how things are done. The funding may need to be shifted based on these new estimates. So maybe if there's too much money being used in land, we need to shift that away and use less money in somewhere else or changing that around. And we also want to ensure that there's still contingency money just in case things go south. It costs more than was anticipated to do certain things, or going forwards, it can impact things about how replacement reserves are funded and what type of money is needed there and how much they need to put in to it. So the kind of shifting gears, a solution to this problem is utilizing a custom data view to see all of these changes from stage to stage across those cost line items. So to do that, we're going to use a custom data view. So this section is going to talk about what custom data views are, some limitations and rules around that, and then kind of how they work. So what are custom data views? Custom data views are SQL queries that you can add into Prolink. So oftentimes people are using the database and they are writing these queries in SQL Server Management Studio. You can test them all there. We highly recommend starting there. And then you can add them into Prolink. And once they're added into Prolink, they function like a normal data view. So utilizing custom data views allows you to join different tables together in the database. So as many of you may know, currently data views that are standard in the system are only one database table. So you can access all of the fields within that table, but you can't join two tables together to see that data side by side. So custom data views allow you to do that. They also allow you to do calculations. So as you might have seen in our problem statement, one of the things that we're going to want to do is see the difference between the value at one stage versus the next stage. So in custom data views, we can do things like adding, subtracting, um, calculating percentages that we need to utilize in this problem. So we can perform these calculations. We can also create summaries or any other aggregations that you can do typically in a SQL query. So after you publish, you then have the option, similar to when you're creating a view in a data view, to either keep that private or you can publicly publish it for all to be able to use. They can create their own views within that as well. And then same with the data views, you can still create your views with custom filters. You can sort it there, show or hide your column, and do all of the regular functionality you're used to with data views in ProLink. So there are a few guidelines that you need to follow when you create this that ProLink will call out and not let you run your script that you might be able to get away with in SQL Server Management Studio. So some guidelines to follow, it must be a select statement so we know all of our data is getting pulled in and what is getting pulled in. And you cannot do select all. That's just because too much data is going to get pulled in, and we want to make sure that you're really limiting it to exactly what you need. It may take a long time to load, and the functionality just doesn't work well. Then certain SQL commands are also not allowed, as well as temporary tables. So we've got create, update, and order by as examples. These are all things that you're going to be doing within HFA or data views within HFA offer as a functionality. So you can't do order by because we do have the sorting feature in ProLink that allows you to order it by whatever you would like to within data views already. So we don't want to stagnate it to that exact order. This allows you to sort it within the system, and you can set custom sorts that it defaults to as well. And then we can't create or update data because every time someone looks at this data view, it may modify or add new data, and you can change your data as needed through Prolink HFA already by going to the record. And then each column name must be defined without any spaces in the name. So when you pull in a column, you can do devdeal.hfa number, and then that's HFA number, or you can do devdeal.hfa number as number or something like that, right? Our system will, if you do camel case, so if you want to merge multiple words together into one word, if you capitalize in between, it will automatically put a space in there. So if you did property name as camel case, so capital P property and then capital N name, it will automatically put the space in there. And you can then also modify the names if you're not happy with how it came out. You can modify them just how you would modify names through the data view admin as well. And you can also adjust the format in there if you don't like the format that it came in, if you don't want to format it within your query. So you can format them through the data view admin as well. And then the biggest thing is that that first column that you have in your select statement has to be a unique integer data type that is aliased as row ID. So it needs to be exactly that, and it needs to be an integer with every row being unique. A lot of times people will use things such as HFA number or something like that to alias it, or not to alias it as your unique integer. Of note though, the row ID will not show up in HFA. So if you want to still see HFA number, you do need to add a second column of the HFA number afterwards. So that is that. And then the final limitation is that your columns that could be considered any personally identifiable information, social security numbers, passwords, anything like that in the system is not allowed in data views because those are things that need to have restricted access to, and that can't be set up through data views individually. Okay, so then how are custom data views kind of join together? This is the main feature as to why many people want to use custom data views, is being able to join tables together. So there's kind of a couple ways you can do this. We have a simple join as well as a more complex join. So as you can see here, we have an example. So this first line here, this from, is the initial table that you're pulling from. So I have this table and I'm aliasing it as alloc app fees just for easier access as I'm typing. I don't need to type out this whole thing. I can just do this, and maybe it's more descriptive for what you need. Then this next line that you see here is just a simple join, and it's adding more information into this table, linking on the property ID. So you can see I'm pulling in more information from properties on their IDs being equal to each other. Our second way of joining in a table is a more complex join. So this allows you to kind of filter down your table into exactly what you need. Maybe you just want to limit your fields or anything like that. So you can see here, I'm choosing just a few fields. I don't need all the fields that are in this table. So I'm just picking these 4. And then also I am able to add these 3 up and save that as total development. So when I am referencing this in my select statement above, I can just do this table.develop total development instead of having to do developer fees plus land ag cost plus existing improvement cost. So that saves me time and makes it look a little neater on my select statement and a little more simpler to read instead of having big long queries of what this is. Then we're choosing the table we want to pull it from. And for this one, I only want the deals that are in the res app stage. I don't want any of the other ones. I just want the res app. So we're filtering all of this information for just the res app ones. And then these this select kind of makes its own table. And since it doesn't have a name currently, since we're modifying it and it's our own table, we have to call it something. So we're calling it ResApp since this is the ResApp stage information. And then we're joining it on where the deal ID equals the deal and the property ID equals the property. You can do one item here, you can do multiple items here. This just tells it how to link those two tables together. So when you're doing this, we highly recommend using left join. What left join does is it takes this initial table that you're pulling from and just matches everything to that. Anything that doesn't match to this left table gets dropped. We aren't looking at it. So the reason we want to do that is because if you're doing a full join where this data still stays that didn't match to anything here, you're going to get a ton of extra information, and that can give you issues with your row ID or give you too much data. So for example, when I brought in this portfolio properties, if I just did a join here, that would list every single portfolio property that you have in your entire system. And we don't want to see that. We want to just see the property costs and then the associated portfolio property information on that. So by limiting it, we are just seeing the relevant information and what you need there. So that's why it's important to know which table you want to utilize for your base and which one you're putting in from here, especially when you're doing left joins. So you really want to make sure that this is the table with all of the information you want to start with, and all the rows you're getting from this table have a unique integer ID that you can use for that row ID. So how do we bring these two items together? What's the solution here? And how do custom data views work in order to solve the problem that we discussed earlier? So the first thing that we want to think about when figuring out how a custom data view works is designing it. What are the fields that we want? What information is important to us? What are we looking for this data view to provide? So what we want is information on the project. This is what the project name is, what an HFA number is, or a deal ID, any kind of information that's telling you where this is. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at a whole bunch of costs and have no idea what it relates to. So we want to see that information on there, and you're going to want to put some sort of identifying information onto all of your custom data views, just so you know what you're looking at and giving it that context of what project this is a part of, what developer is the one who submitted this, so you can pull in all of that information. Then we want to see what the cost is at each stage. So while we are pulling in the difference afterwards, we want to know, what did it start as? What is it in the next stage and the third stage? In this example, we're going to use 3 stages. So we want to see that cost at the ResApp stage, the ALACAP stage, and the 8609 feasibility stage. And then we want to know what the difference is between those costs in the various stages. So moving from that first ResApp stage to the ALEC application stage, how much did that cost change from one to the next one? And then what is the percentage difference between these costs? $1,000 on $5,000 is a lot more than $1,000 on $1 million. It makes a big difference, even though they have the same amount. So we're calculating the percentage difference between these costs. So what it originally was minus what it is now divided by what it originally was. So what percentage of that original cost has changed. And then after we know what fields we want, we move into what tables are needed. So looking at these fields, we know that the project information on the project, we need a table for that. And then we need the cost at each stage. So we need that cost information for each stage as well. And then these two, since they're calculated and they're calculated based on this, we don't need any extra tables for these two. So now that we know what tables are needed, and looking at this, we may need to join in this table a couple of times when it's filtered we can move on to start building our data view. So as you can see here, this is the start of the data view that we're building. So we're starting with that select statement like we always do. And then we're using the ID as our row ID. And then we're just pulling in the name so we can see what this property is and recognize it and then look into it more if we need. So that would be our select statement followed by their column and then the row name of the project. And then this custom data view is compiling all the costs at different stages. So what we're doing here is this first line is our initial cost. So we're starting in the res app stage and we're taking the total lands as an example. So we're doing res app.total lands and we're showing that column as res app total lands so that when we are in our system, we're not just seeing total lands, total lands, total lands. All your columns need to be unique. And then we do the same for alloc app and app feasibility here. And then in between each, we're seeing the difference and the percentage between this stage and this stage, then this stage and this stage here. So here we are subtracting the alloc app total lands minus the res app total lands to get the difference. These coalesces are just here because SQL does not like doing math with null values. If you have a null anywhere in your math, it is going to make the whole value null regardless of what other values you have in there. So this is just saying if total lands is null, make it 0. So we can do our math properly. And similarly here, we're doing the total the alloc app minus the res app divided by the alloc app. And then we're formatting that as a percentage just so you can see it and it's not a decimal point with a bunch of zeros in front. So it looks a little nicer. So this is just a percentage with 3 decimal points. So that's what that is. And we do that again for the next stage. So after we do that for all of our fields that we want to calculate, we're going to get into the joins at the bottom. So here's what I did for each stage. So we are choosing to pull in a couple fields and then I'm doing calculations for each of these. So as you could see here, we had these totals. So those totals are actually fields that I created. So I added up all these fields individually in this join so that you could just call the total and we didn't need to put the math all back up top. So we have all of these different items. You can see we save them as total development. This one's total structures. We have all of those fields here. And then we're joining in some tables to give us more context as well. One of the things in Prolink is our pick lists all have their own table. So within the table, it has an ID number, and then you can join in your pick list table to get the name. So I wanted to get the stage name so I could filter on exactly see what stage it is. So I joined in that stage pick list table, and then I did my where to filter this just for that res app stage. And then we have costing type of 2. That's just actual funding. We don't want to see all of the different various fundings in this. So I wanted to filter it to 2 just so that we don't pull in extra information we don't need. This is another way you can do this. You don't need to join in your pick list tables if you're just using it for a filter. You can choose to use the ID instead. And then we're naming it Res App and joining in on the deal ID. And we do this for every stage we want to bring in. So I did this for Res App, Alloc App, and 8609 App Feasibility. So after that is fully written out, ready to go, we bring it into ProLink, test it there, make sure ProLink is happy with it. We didn't break any of the rules. And then you can find it under your custom data views in the data views on the left-hand side. We have custom data views, and then this one is called cost variance. So when I click on it, I can see all of my information in here. Here you can modify the data further, filter, sort, any sort of grouping you like to do, like you would do with any other data view that you have. You can do that. So how does this help? How is this the solution? This allows the agencies to see the variance at award versus closing versus cost certification, see the differences, and then they can make decisions that if you are comfortable with these changes, is that an acceptable percentage difference or amount difference that was expected? You can see the differences in your line items to make sure everything eventually worked out and is good to go. And then understand how much you have then available in order to issue the loan. Finally, this will allow you to be able to work with developers both on this project and the future to ensure that funding is properly allocated, both in the remainder of this project if you are midway through, or at the end of the project when they're potentially applying for new projects. You can go back and look at this and see, do they always allocate money incorrectly, or do they typically go over in a certain place or under in a certain place? And that can help you make decisions going forwards. So that is the end of this. I'm going to pass it back to Alexis to wrap up our webinar here.
Thank you, Alessandra, for a great presentation. If you have any follow-up questions, please be sure to share them with us. We're going to be sharing all of our presentation materials in our follow-up email that will be going out to everybody. I just want to wrap up by introducing next month's webinar. For next month, we're going to have Nick Jacques, who is our Senior Product Owner at ProLink. He's going to be covering managing dev draws in the ProLinkHFA dev module. So we are sharing that registration link in the chat right now, so be sure and click on that if you'd like to join us. Thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your month.